When I first attempted it, it was very overwhelming because I have the problem and the explanation book, um, and I kind of got burned out. I was able to go through every single problem, every concept in there, and a lot of it wasn't really relevant. When I first started studying, I actually was lacking that motivation.
Bonjour guys, welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to interview Jason, who recently passed his FE exam after taking it 2 times. The first time he took it, it was 10 years ago, but we'll dive in more into that in a little bit. And so Jason is going to share with us his FE experience and what he did to pass his FE exam. Jason, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Sure, my pleasure.
Awesome. Okay, so let's start off with you telling us a little bit about yourself. When did you graduate and what was your major?
I graduated back in 2010, December, and I majored in civil. And at that time, I knew I wasn't going into civil engineering, so I didn't really try on my first attempt for the FE exam. And at that time, it was also only paper, so it was quite overwhelming.
Okay, so did you just say that you weren't gonna go into the civil engineering field? Is that what you said?
Yeah, yes, that's right.
Okay.
I actually had decided I was going to Japan to teach, so I found it kind of irrelevant at that moment in time.
Okay. So what did you teach in Japan?
English. Um, I did do an initial search for civil engineering in Japan, but most of the demand is filled by natives here.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So why did you decide to take the FE like 10 years later?
Um, well, I'm thinking of going back to the States, and I'd like to have that under my belt before I make the big transition.
Awesome. Okay, so you've been in Japan since 2010
Yes,
or
that's right.
2011?
Yes.
Okay, and you just been teaching English this whole time, and now you want to come back to the state, and that's why you took FE.
Yep, that's right.
Awesome. Okay, so how do you like Japan? I know this is a little bit like off topic, but I'm just really curious.
um, yeah, I love it here. Actually, I mean, it's difficult to choose between where you want to live. For me at this point, because I like both countries. Um, and Japanese are very polite, and the culture is very um, polite. Like for example, when you go to a convenience store, they always have a smile on their face, and they always go the extra mile to help you.
Hmm.
Um, it's really difficult to explain. It's also very safe in Japan. If you lose your wallet, you can get it returned, and all your money will be in the wallet. It happens quite often, actually.
Wow, that's awesome. So what led you first to decide to go to Japan?
Uh, a lot, a lot of different factors, but that's a difficult question.
Sorry.
Well, I had a lot of my last year of civil engineering. I actually studied Japanese, and I had some friends, native Japanese friends, at my university. And after I graduated, I went on a graduation trip to Japan, just to see the country and enjoy myself in my free time. And I really liked it. So, and when I was there, I had like 2 weeks of volunteer teaching experience, and I had no idea that they hired teachers with completely different degree. Um, and I had never even considered teaching because I was sick of school at that point. But I actually really enjoyed the interaction, and so when I came back to the States after my trip, I started looking for a trip for some jobs, what was available, and I just ended up in teaching because that was the easiest path, I think.
Okay. So one last question, and then we'll go back to the FE exam. What made you want to leave Japan now and come back to the US?
Um, well, as you get older, it's not just about me anymore. It's about my family. Um, so I'm thinking more about my daughter now. I have a daughter and she's 4 years old, but she's Japanese and American, and I feel like at this point I'd like to go back so that she can really learn English. And I don't know, I may go back to Japan in the future, but right now I just want to go back and give her that experience so that later on she can have a choice for herself as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think now that you have the FE exam, I think it might be really easy for you to transition to here and like especially get like a civil engineering field.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's going to help a lot. Okay,
Uh,
now let's
another,
sorry, go ahead.
sorry, one more factor I was thinking about was my age. So as you get older, I think it'd be harder for me to enter the engineering field without having experience already. So I wanted to get some experience before I get too old to go back, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Are you applying right now to the civil engineering jobs? Are you trying to apply like from Japan or no?
Yeah, I am, but most of them, just because of the distance and the time, most positions, they want them to start immediately.
Mhm.
So um, I'm not actively seeking right now, but when I actually move back, I think I'll start my search seriously.
Yeah. But you are seeing like some opportunities, right? So,
Yeah, I am checking the advertisements and everything, and that's one of the reasons I did the FE exam, because I saw FE exam was almost a requirement for a lot of jobs. You had to get it within a year or two before, um, or else you would lose your. I guess they would lay you off. I'm not sure what happens there.
I think I had a student. Oh yeah, it was Fred. He was a civil engineer student, and I posted his interview a couple weeks ago, and he went into the aerospace field, and now he wanted to go back to the civil engineering field. And since a lot of the jobs in civil engineering require the FE, so before he was able to apply, he actually had to get his FE exam. So I think, and I'm not sure where he is right now, but I think you could, what I'm trying to say is that you could still, like, I don't think you will have a problem getting a job in the civil engineering field just because you passed your FE. So that proves that you know your engineering pretty well.
Um,
Okay.
that's good. That's good relief to hear.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Now let's jump into scheduling. How many months before the FE exam did you begin studying?
um, Technically, I started studying. I picked up the Lindbergh book maybe 2 years ago,
Hmm.
and when I first attempted it, it was very overwhelming because I have the problem and the explanation book, um, and I kind of got burned out. And it wasn't until a year later that I actually seriously started studying.
So when did you take your FE exam? It was like October 2020.
Yep, October this year.
Okay. And so did you start studying for it like a year ago? Like, would you say like around 2019, you've been studying for it till like now?
Yeah, I actually I think I started around the end of summertime last year.
Oh, wow. Okay. So
So
it has
I
been a long journey for you.
yes,
So you said you started studying the end of summer last year. Now, were you studying consistently, like every day, or were there some months where you had to stop studying?
I'd say I was only studying in my free time when I first started, but since uh, around December last year, I started a consistent study schedule about 3 hours a day, um, and I pushed myself through the whole Lindbergh book. It was terrible, but I was able to go through every single problem, every concept in there, and a lot of it wasn't really relevant. And at that time, I had planned to take that uh, the the FE test before it changed in July. So
Mm.
when the changes happened because of coronavirus, and I couldn't schedule before July, I was kind of stressed out about that as well. But um, there wasn't actually much change, I think, between the old version and the new version. Like you said, I think you said in some of your videos,
Mhm.
um, it was already like that. They just updated the specifications in the handbook.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I'm glad you kind of brought that up because I always get emails from students like, is there like how about the new changes? Is there like a new book or new resources, or is the course up to date? And I always, kind of mention that like the changes has been happening and they just kind of made it official on July 1st. So how many hours did you study per week on average?
Um, so I would often study at work whenever I have a chance, during my lunch break, or if I have a free planning period. Like for example, if I already have my class ready, I would actually just study my engineering work. Hopefully, no one from my work checks this video, but um, and I also worked. I studied about 4 or 5 hours on Saturday, and I generally I took Sunday off, or I only studied an hour on Sunday. So how many hours is that? About 18, 20 hours a week.
Okay, that's pretty good. And did you increase that time as the exam got closer?
Yeah, and actually, I wanted to. I in my schedule, I planned that the last 2 weeks I would just take a break and cool off. But the closer my exam got, the more and more I studied more intensely. Um, Even to take my test on my test day, I I'm in Japan, so I have to go to the nearest metropolitan city, which is about 6 hours by car. Um, so I took a night bus the night before, and then I just took a whole day and I studied. I went to Starbucks and I just studied in the cafe all day, and then the next day I took my exam. So I didn't really give myself a break like I wanted to, but I feel like that last minute of reviewing kind of gave me more confidence.
Yeah. I feel like because some people I usually recommend to you guys to kind of just take it like especially the day before the FE exam to not solve any new problems, just kind of review and going over the problems on the course. It's just because like the exam is draining, right? Sitting there for like 6 hours during the exam can be really tiring. But I feel
Yeah,
like with your situation, it was more like, hey, like we just gotta power through. I'm almost there. I'm almost to that finish line. I'm just gonna like keep going because like you don't want to do this again, and so you just want to pass, so you just kept going. And I think for some people it works.
yeah, that's exactly what my feeling was. I had a lot of writing on that test, as far as time and money. Um, Being in Japan, I have to pay twice the registration fee. So I already had $400 invested for one test. And I also, I had to go to another city, so I had to stay at a friend's house, and all the expenses add up. And um, I told myself I was going to either go all the way. I was going to go all the way that test. And I told my family and my friends. I made sure I had that pressure to push me to my best ability.
That's interesting. It's interesting because so for you sharing to the people that you're taking the exam kind of helped you and pressured you to keep studying, making sure that you pass. And I've had
Yeah,
students who had a different experience. Like I think it was Anthony. he did not want to share it with people because he felt like that kind of pressure would have affected his performance, just knowing that he had to pass, because if he fails, he has to tell people that he failed, and he wasn't okay with that. So like just kind of like not telling people is kind of helped him to like not have that kind of pressure and just focus on his exam. So the only people knew was like his wife and I think his boss, because he was close to his boss. I'm not sure the last attempt if he told his boss actually, but for you is the opposite, like telling people that kind of helps you, you know, keep going. So I guess it just really depends on the person. Yeah.
Yeah, I when I first started studying, I actually was lacking that motivation. But after I told people, I remember I was watching one of the videos. One of your tips in one of the videos was to tell tell people, and then I mean, like you said, it depends on the person's personality, right? But for me, it really helped push me the extra mile. I didn't actually seriously tackle my studying until I told everybody, and I felt that pressure.
That's awesome. Great. Yeah. And I mean, I think, and this is why I like to do these interviews, because everybody has, they share different tips, and then people, they just need to figure out what works for them. So what works for you might work for someone else. And, you know, and that's why I do these interviews, because they really help. Um, Now, you did mention that the day before the exam, you went to Starbucks and you were studying. I live here in California where we're in full lockdown. So there's no option of going to Starbucks. Everything is closed because of COVID. So did
Yeah.
COVID affect your studying, or is it more like open over there in Japan? Are you more able to go to like coffee shops and just kind of study?
Um, COVID, it affected even Japan as well, but the infection rate was lower. So also the laws are a little different. The government couldn't say by law everyone has to lock down. They could only suggest it. And at the beginning of the pandemic, a lot of stores did close down or had limited seating. Starbucks closed down for a long period, but I can't remember. But a few months ago, it did reopen, and they have the social distancing, the spaced seating, and they have partitions, which is actually nicer when you're studying to have a partition. It kind of creates your own zone, and I could easily get into studying without being distracted.
Yeah, it's like having your little space, your little office for free. You're not paying for it, just for a cup of coffee, maybe. That's awesome.
And I definitely say COVID-19 has been like very stressful for a lot of people, even me, but um, it did help me study more because uh, we had to partially lock down our school, and because of that, I had more time to study as well, um, and it kind of pushed me in the direction of studying more, I think, than just a normal work day.
That's great. Yeah. So you had more free time to study. And did
Yeah.
you actually use a lot, like, did you go to Starbucks a lot in the last 3 months to get some studying done?
Oh, actually, my typical study day, I rather just be at my own personal desk, and I just shut the door, keep my daughter out, or if it's at work at my desk, it's fine. But um, yeah, typically I live very far out in the countryside, so it's actually it would be a major journey just to get to a Starbucks for me. So personally, I just study at home on a typical day.
Awesome. Okay. Now let's jump into preparation. So what material did you use?
So, like I said, first book I used was the Lindbergh book. I think I have it right here.
And where did you get it from? Because I know you live in Japan. Do you guys have it there? You could actually purchase it there.
No, I couldn't. As well as the practice test. The practice test was quite annoying because if I tried to ship it international, it was like $100 shipping cost. So
Wow.
I I did this relay method. I sent it to my father, and then he remailed it to me for cheaper. So It was quite annoying actually. And after the test changed, I had already had the 2017 practice test, and then I had to order the new 2020 practice test. So um, it was quite troublesome.
Yeah.
So I started with the Lindbergh book, but I would not recommend this for normal students because it's too thick. Like, and when you're reading it, it feels very bland. Like, um, a lot of it doesn't make sense unless you look at a problem or you Google the concept or something. So eventually, I just switched to the problem book only, um, and I also found your YouTube channel as I was studying through the Lindbergh book. Um, I used yours. I was trying to cover one subject at a time, and I started writing my cheat sheet and post-it notes, and it was getting really messy. And then I saw your method after I think I signed up for your newsletter, and you sent me some materials. So I started combining all uh, my cheat sheet notes into one document by subject. Um, and I also used one more course on Coursera.org. There's a Georgia Tech University FE review. Uh, it doesn't really compare to your course, I would say, but it is done by a professor. And there were several mistakes. And a lot of people have caught on the mistakes, but they never fixed it. But the advantage is it's completely free. You don't have to buy it. And I went through the problems. I worked the problems as before I saw the solution, just like you do in your course. Um, but also, I felt like because he was a professor, he went into theory more often or derivations. And I did feel like that was a waste of time. And sometimes there would be a formula not in the handbook. And I particularly remember fluid mechanics. I think he went more in depth than the FE exam covered. But because of that, I did feel more prepared and more confident. Um, and I went through all the Lindbergh problems in the practice book, and after that, I purchased your course to kind of review and make sure I have a grasp of every subject. Um, yeah, I think that's basically all the materials. Whenever, well, sorry, there's one more material. Uh, the calculator, everyone has a different calculator. I have a Casio, but actually I even have notes here because my calculator handbook, whenever I wanted to know how to do something, it was really important that I would be able to know my calculator better than, so that if I had like a statistic problem, I could just put it in the calculator rather than depending on the handbook, for example. And of course, I used the manual, but I also Googled or used YouTube to watch quick tutorials sometimes.
Awesome. Okay.
Um,
Now, when you took the practice exam, did you take it? Did you study off of it? Did you look at the problems, or did you like took it as an actual exam? Like I usually recommend to you guys, like take the practice exam, mimic the exam environment, time yourself. Did you do that?
yes, because I watched your interview videos and your advice, but so after I had finished the Lindbergh book, I wanted to know where I was at, what area I needed to review, or what area I had forgotten, because I had studied over a year. So, and it turns out most of it was the beginning material because it had been so long for me. Um, I don't think everybody needs that much time to study for this test, but for me personally, because I had been out of school 10 years and hadn't really used it, I wanted to make sure I was confident. So I gave myself time, and then the coronavirus happened, so it extended my time. Uh, yeah, sorry. What was the question again?
So I asked actually, oh yeah, I asked if you took practice exams. If you
Oh yeah, so
and you said once you finished Linder book, you took one just to see where you're at.
yeah, I took the practice test, and when uh, I tried to time myself so that I'd have 3 minutes like on the real test, and I found out the time was actually my issue. I could solve all the problems, but when I was given only 3 minutes a problem, I couldn't complete the test. Even on my actual test, I ended up 10 questions I couldn't complete because of just time. But I felt regrets because I knew how to answer the questions. Um, so I did that as initial diagnosis to see what my weak areas were, and I reviewed those specifically using your course as well. Um, and then I took another practice test, and I think I took about four or five practice tests. You sent me some PDFs as well. Actually, I was surprised because there was an unofficial practice test that you had sent me, and I remember clearly that there was a specific problem from that test that was also on the real test. Um, but the official practice test, I found that they didn't actually change the questions that much. Like, even though I checked the 2010 version, only a few problems were different than the 2020 version. So the official test wasn't very helpful in the older versions compared to the new version. But it did give me an idea of what area I need to review and brush up on.
Awesome. And do you remember what were your weaknesses?
For me, it was fluid mechanics and environmental, more environmental than anything because I did have like an environmental class, but I don't remember anything from it because the entire class we just had a huge project where we designed a water treatment plant, and I never actually learned anything from it because I was just busy throwing things into different formulas. So I didn't conceptually learn anything from that class. Um, Probably the same thing with fluid mechanics, uh, but I did review it on your course, and I felt a lot more confident um, with the fluid mechanics.
Awesome. Yeah, I feel like a lot of civil engineer students like they just don't like environmental, or they just like it's one of the common weaknesses for civil engineering students. And I think it's okay, like you can still pass your FE exam even if you struggle with the one or two topics. Yeah. Okay, now let's discuss some of your study techniques. Are there any study habits that you found not to be effective?
You've mentioned this in so many videos, and I also found the same true. Whenever you do a problem and you get stuck and you can't solve it, it's very tempting to just look at the solution because there's several paths that you could go, and sometimes I felt like if I just try it and then it's the wrong path, I felt like I was wasting time. Um, Whereas if I could just look at the solution, it'd be faster. But in the long run, it doesn't help you um, conceptually learn how to approach different problems because on your test, you're not going to have the exact same type of question. You'll have perhaps some kind of new conceptual problem, and you have to figure it out on the spot on the test, for example. So I think it's good to struggle through the problems and before you look at the solution. But of course, I think there's a limit to how much time you should put into one problem. Um,
What was your limit?
I think around 30 minutes. Sometimes I would get frustrated and I wanted to throw my book, but I didn't. But um, 30 minutes, I would just stop and take a breather, coffee break or something, and come back to it and check the solution.
Yeah.
But I did find that your course was better because of the layouts. So you had the problem introduction. Um, so before first I tried the problem without looking at the hints. But if it was a problem I struggled on, then I could play your hints, and that put me in the correct direction without giving me the solution immediately, so that I could still struggle through the problem and remember what I did.
Mm. That's awesome. Okay, then I'm gonna make sure to do that in the afternoon as well, giving those hints just to make sure the students like struggle through the problem before giving out the solution. Um, and I think struggling through a problem for 30 minutes, I think that's actually really good. Because a lot of students, I feel like, 10 minutes in, 15 minutes in, that's the maximum they can do. And then they're impatient and they just want to look at the solution. I usually recommend like between 30, 45 minute, struggling through the problem. And then another thing I usually recommend is that once you're done with the problem, take a step back and then just kind of look at it, look at the big picture, like, and just try to re-explain it to yourself so that you reinforce the concepts. Because a lot of times we solve a problem and you're like, oh, okay, I see what she did, and then you write it down and move on to the next one, and it's like it's not sure if you actually got it. So taking a second and just going over those steps one more time and just looking at the big picture is very important as well. So, yeah. Was there anything specific that you did that helped you stay motivated while studying for the FE exam?
See, I'm having trouble thinking about that question now.
Yeah.
Um,
It's a really good one though, right? Because like, especially, so here, think about it for a second. So you graduated 10 years ago. You are doing something completely different than what you majored in. And, and now you started studying again, and you are in this path of like trying to remember the concept that you learned in college and trying to take this exam that has covers like 14 topics, right? That's a lot. So
yeah.
they must what did you do that really kept you going and kept you motivated to keep going, right? Because I'm sure like at some point you felt frustrated because you couldn't remember the concepts, and you were just like tired and you were feeling overwhelmed, especially because you use Linderbook, that big book. A lot of people, they just feel so intimidated and they don't want to even start studying for the FE exam. You dived into that, like you were saying this book is like plain and like it's hard, and then you still dived into that. So what was it that really kept you motivated?
Um, okay, so well, of course, the ultimate goal of changing careers. Um, every time I'd have to work on, for example, a weekend or something, that gave me lots of motivation to study more, because I did not want to work on a weekend at my current job. Uh, also, I think my study habits, like I think you've talked about it at some point. Like I made a routine so that I don't have to motivate myself. I every morning, or every on the weekend, it'd be the morning too, but every morning I would just I'd turn my computer on, open the handbook, open my study materials, get my scratch paper out, and I would force myself into that. And I also, one big thing for me, I was really distracted by social media or Facebook. So when I really wanted to study, I had to deactivate my Facebook because I didn't have the willpower to log out and just say, oh, I'm not going to log in. I didn't have that kind of willpower. That was a huge distraction for me because it's like my email. I just naturally check it in my routine every few hours or something. And I had to just turn that off. And it was challenging because also when I joined your course, you have the Facebook group, and I didn't want to turn my Facebook back on because of that. But towards the end, I reactivated my Facebook just so I could go into that group and get some feedback from other members, and that helped a lot. And at that point, I wasn't distracted anymore. But initially, I had to disconnect from that social world in order to stay on track, I think.
Yeah. I mean, you brought up a really good point, and thank you for sharing that. I have some students who I like each time I am on like Instagram to post something, I see them and I'm like, get off Instagram, go study a little bit for your FE. I think it's really important to remove that distraction because like if you are studying and you just go, let me just check for a minute, that minute turns into 20 minutes. And not only that, it really distracts you. Now, when you go back to studying, you have to start from the beginning. You go, wait, where did I left off? And that takes another 30 minutes. And you just really like, it doesn't let you really dive in and just kind of absorb all the material and just kind of be focused. So I think, you know, I really like how you moved social media just to kind of help you stay focused. And I'm also glad you brought up the study groups. So there are also some like other students who don't have social media at all to begin with. They like, and I ask them to join the Facebook group because I know how helpful it is, and they're just like, I don't have Facebook or I don't have Instagram. Like they don't use social media. So what we decided, my team and I, is that we created study groups on GroupMe, and so that's what we've been actually working on the last 2 weeks. And we're just putting so a couple groups, so groups for engineers, engineer students, and then also putting groups of students of 3 or 4 students, and just kind of doing same discipline, live almost close states, because we don't want someone from California and New York trying to study, right? Or one in Japan and one in California. That would be very like, you're gonna start in the morning, you know, the students California is still sleeping. So there's that, like we're trying to do time zone and then also the discipline and all that. So I think that could be very helpful because a lot of students who I talked to and also in the interviews, they felt like being in a study group really helps to keep you motivated. Um, and there's a benefit to that. So I'm really glad you brought it up. Now, you did mention that you would study in the morning, and I want to go back to that a little bit. Are you a morning person, and is that when you most of your studying you got it done?
Um, Actually, I wouldn't say I'm one or the other, but I do feel like if I study in the morning, I feel like I don't have to force myself because in the afternoon, I think everybody feels kind of tired or um, like that's the lowest point of the day, I think, for most people. So I wanted to make sure I cover as much as I can in the morning before I get to the afternoon because I know in the afternoon it's a challenge to motivate yourself to study. And even if you study when you're that tired, I'm not sure if you'll remember the material that you studied. Um, but yeah, I also studied after I came home from work. Um, so I would eat dinner and then I would study an hour or two after dinner. So in that respect, I think I'm both morning and night, but I don't stay up that late.
Hmm, I see. Okay. Now let's explore the day before you took the FE. Were you feeling ready and were you stressed? I know you mentioned that you were in Starbucks just doing problems, but how were you feeling about the exam?
As far as the practice exam, I had confidence. Like towards the end, when I did the practice, the official test to check my weak points, I was scoring like 90% almost. But it may have been because I've seen the problems so many times. It's hard to uh, put that to account for that factor. But um, I did feel confident because I had covered an entire Lindbergh book, and I went through most of the subjects in your course. I think there was only two subjects I didn't cover because I knew I was strong in those subjects. Um, but I still felt pressure, and I wanted to study up to the last minute. I found some of those extra problems. I posted in the Facebook group from the YouTube channel for NCES. I just screenshotted them from there. I wanted to work those out and make sure I could answer those as well.
Awesome. Okay, now the day of the exam, how were you feeling? Like during the exam, when you were taking the exam?
I actually thought I would have been more nervous, but I wasn't nervous. Um, I felt determined. Like I had to, each question, even if I faced a difficult question, I felt like I had to move on because every question was a new question, and I couldn't let myself down. I had to push through the entire test, and also I had a very difficult time watching my time. Like I wanted to spend 3 minutes per question, um, so I felt a huge pressure with time. And the morning session I had 2 hours remaining. When I had finished that, I felt confident. Um, but I wanted it to be 2 hours and 30 minutes, but I just couldn't do it because I wanted to make sure I answered all the questions with some confidence.
So you still, like, even during the day of the exam, you still struggled a little bit with time management.
Yes, definitely. I think um, even if, I mean, there were some quite obviously simple questions I could answer immediately. Um, but if it was there were, I think you've talked about this before, there were questions that even if I was a professional in that field, I would have no idea how to answer the question. Um, so when I saw those questions, I tried to eliminate answers and think about which two would make the most sense, and then guess which one would be the best answer.
I see. So you did like an educated guess.
Yes.
Okay. So how many questions did you have to guess?
Um. Well, the last 10 questions, at least, I guessed on because I didn't have time. And actually, I couldn't guess on all of them because there were 2 or 3 fill in the blank answers at the end. Um, but in the morning session, I'd say maybe 5 or so. I can't be sure because I was really trying to just concentrate on doing the next question. Um, and I did try to do some flagging strategies. Like if I didn't know the answer, I would flag it, put my best guess, and then move on to the next question. But because of time, I just didn't have enough time to go back to my flags. But I did make sure I confidently uh, had an educated guess before I moved on.
Okay. Now, if you had to redo the exam, what would you do about time management?
I would do all the questions that I know, um, and the simple questions, of course, answer those as well. And I think what I would do to save time, to make my time more efficient, is those questions that are almost impossible unless you're in that profession. I think I would have guessed faster on that and just did an arbitrary number, arbitrary letter like A, and then instead of wasting my time on that question, I could have used it on another question that I knew how to solve. Is what I think I would do to optimize my time.
Yeah, that's a really good suggestion, I think. And I think actually a lot of the students do that. Students that I interviewed, they would try to kind of do that, like get the easy questions first, get the questions that you know, the questions that you have no clue about, just put an answer, flag it in case you have enough time to come back to it. But I would just kind of move on and just get to the questions that you know. And then I also recommend usually to flag the long questions, because like if you get the easy questions, you have higher chances of scoring like a lot of points. And then, you know, whatever time you have left, you can spend it on those long questions that you kind of know. But yeah. So were you feeling confident when you finished the exam?
No, I didn't have confidence because of the last 10 questions that I couldn't complete. Just like even now looking back, I I think I had confidence, but at that moment, after I finished my test, I was kind of frustrated because I knew I could answer the questions, but I didn't have enough time, and it was my fault for not managing the time correctly. So I was only focusing on those 10 questions that I couldn't complete, and it just tore my confidence away. The fact, the morning session, I think I probably did I can't see my results. That's one of the things with the FE test, but I did feel very confident with the morning session, at least.
Yeah. Yeah, well, you know what? I mean, you passed your FE, so I'm pretty sure you did pretty well overall. And I'm just really glad that those 10 questions didn't really hurt you. Now, are there any areas that were particularly difficult that you would have studied more?
You know, there is one that really struck me was surveying.
Hmm.
When I when I checked the Lindbergh book, there was a lot of problems not like that in the Lindbergh, and wasn't in any of the practice tests. But for example, there was the one unofficial practice test made by some professor that you sent me. That actually had the same style of question that was on the test, and I was surprised because I didn't think I would use it on the test. And there was a lot of repeatable questions in the test, like it had the same formula or same section, and it was a recurring theme. They would use the same area over more than one time, which I thought was surprising because I didn't get some of the questions I expected to get. Like for can I mention that here? I don't
Yeah, yeah.
actually. I don't think I should mention it, but um, for for example, the transportation. I expected to have some questions on curves or fluid mechanics. I expected some more Bernoulli equation. I didn't get to use or structural design. I didn't get a moment or design, or I didn't get any kind of design problem. I felt like it was kind of swayed uh, in another direction.
That's interesting. Were there more conceptual questions in those subjects that you mentioned?
Yeah,
Or
I
just
did. Even if it wasn't conceptual, there was conceptual, but it was tricky because they phrased the question like solve this problem, but if you knew conceptually that this force is a zero force member, you don't need to solve it, for example. But they phrased it like you need to. They provided all the numbers and they phrased it so that it looks like you need to solve the problem, but actually it's just conceptual.
I see. Okay. Now, are there any topics that were easier than you expected?
I definitely say geotechnical was much easier than I had practiced or studied for.
Mm.
Uh, also, mathematics was much simpler. Like I said, they kind of chose a specific area of each of those, and statistics was easy too. Um, and I really struggled with statistics when I was doing practice problems. But they kind of used a recurring theme for problem sets, and if you knew how to do one problem, you knew how to do the other problem.
So I know you said that you're gonna, come back to the US and then try to get into the civil engineering field. Have you decided which field you're going to go to in the civil engineering industry?
Yeah, that's a difficult question. Like I've been struggling internally, like deciding what area I want to go into as well. Um, in school, I enjoyed geotechnical more than the other areas, so I'm leaning towards that, but I'm not I'm not going to limit myself. I'm also kind of interested in um, I like computer work, so I wouldn't mind doing like AutoCAD designing and consulting.
Oh, I see. Okay, awesome. Um, Now, do you have any closing remarks for engineers who are trying to pass the FE exam?
The test is not very difficult. I think it's just a matter of how much time you put into studying, exposure time, right? So you have to, I'd say you have to study at least 3 hours a day. I'm not sure what you recommend, but if you put in the effort and time, even if you fail a few times, it's just the end result that matters. So, and anyone can pass the test if you just put in the amount of time. I think so.
Awesome. Okay, great. Well, Jason, thank you so much for sharing your FE experience with us. I really appreciate it, and thank you for your time.
Yep, thank you.
Awesome.
And thank you for the videos. The YouTube videos really helped me a lot, I think.
No problem. That's great. No problem. I hope this interview helps you prepare better for your FE exam. And also, let me know in the comments below what was your favorite tip that Jason has shared with us. Now, don't forget to give me a big thumbs up if you like this video, and make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell so you get notified each time I post new videos. Thank you guys for watching. Good luck with your studying, and I will see you soon. À la prochaine.